There's 6,000 shipwrecks in the Great Lakes, maybe 10,000, but there's one that pretty much everybody on the Great Lakes knows about.
Very upsetting to see this.
The immediate concern is to recover survivors.
Yes.
My dad was on the Edmund Fitzgerald. I just remember hearing it on the news, saying, "Mom, I'm scared."
A freighter carrying a crew of 29 disappeared on Lake Superior during a severe storm last night, and so far, no survivors have been found.
As somebody who sailed on it, as a crew member, I want to know.
By the time the Fitz got into the worst of the conditions, there were winds of around 55 miles per hour, and those waves were 25 to 30 feet high.
More storms than any other ship. You know, this is a ship that was known for pushing big gales, a captain who believed he could get away with it.
You see Whitefish Point right there? 17 nautical miles from Whitefish Point is where the Edmund Fitzgerald went down.
The last time I talked with him, he said he was holding his own, and that's the last time I lost contact after that.
Now you're going to go pull up anchor and go back out in 30-foot waves, try to find a ship you know is already gone. And that is the sailor's code right there.
Locks were built in 1855, and really the parade of ship traffic hasn't stopped since then.
During World War II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt stationed 7,000 Army soldiers to protect the Soo Locks. It was the most guarded point of the entire North America. Why? Because the arsenal of democracy right down the road over here, Willow Run and Ford Motor Company and so on, cranking out a B-17 once an hour. None of that happens if you don't get the iron ore from Duluth, Minnesota, through the Soo Locks, down here. If the Germans somehow found a way to bomb the Soo Locks, we lose the war. That is not an exaggeration. That's where all your stuff comes from. It's the cement in your basement, it's the steel in your car, it's the food in your table. It all comes on Great Lakes shippers. Edmund Fitzgerald was a real person. He was the CEO of Northwestern Mutual Insurance in Milwaukee, big concern. But his 5 uncles had all been Great Lakes captains. His grandfather was one of the great Great Lakes shipbuilders. So it's in the blood. And he decides in the mid-50s, near the end of his career at Northwestern Mutual, I want to build the greatest ship that's ever sailed the Great Lakes. And they do. And they built it right here at the Great Lakes Engineering Work right down the river in Zug Island, basically.
They came up with a production welder that could triple the time that they could weld, and they also built giant modules that 3 different companies could build along the slip, and then the crane would lift them together, and even the shipyard workers were like, I couldn't believe how fast that went together.
On June 7th, 1958, they launched the greatest ship in the history of the Great Lakes.
The Fitzgerald was really, in a lot of ways, designed to break records. It was designed to be fast. When it was launched, it was the largest ship. Even a Detroit newspaper called it the largest man-made object dropped into the Great Lakes. When a whistle would blow, they had to knock pegs out or something that would allow that ship to slide sideways down into the basin, there in the Detroit River.
Huge crowd came, though, because they were aware this was something special.
But yeah, thousands of people. If you look at some of the historic photographs, there's all these recreational boats and things like that are there. So this was a big deal.
But it takes Mrs. Fitzgerald 3 tries to smash the champagne on the nose of the ship. That's considered a bad omen. And then it takes him a long time to finally squeeze the boat into the river, really, Detroit River. Much longer than expected. It slams across the other side, it smashes the other side, smashes back. One guy from Toledo was so shocked by all this, he had a heart attack and died. It's a bit of an ominous day when they launched the ship.
For most of the people who were there, this was a dramatic day. This huge 729-foot ship, largest ship on the Great Lakes at that point. It was a big deal.
The Edmund Fitzgerald was as long, almost exactly, as the tallest of the Renaissance Center buildings. The normal route is from the head of the lakes to the Keweenaw, to Whitefish Bay, through the Sioux Locks, straight shot down Lake Huron, through the St. Clair River, Lake St. Clair, the Detroit River, and on to Toledo. That was enough taconite to build 7,000 cars per shipload. That's how much they were carrying. And then they'd come back empty, come back light, as they say, about 2.5 days back. So about a 5-6 day round trip. And they did that 50 times every season. It is the longest, it's got the biggest cargo holds. It's also the most luxurious, amazingly. Outfitted by J.L. Hudson here in Detroit. It spared no expense, carpeting, tile floors in the bathrooms, air conditioning, and TVs. These things in 1958 you wouldn't find in most hotels.
If you were a VIP or if you were someone who had connections, you could get a cruise on this ship.
This was the flagship. Any big mucky-muck from National Steel would be invited for a summer cruise with the best cook, the best captain, air-conditioned comfort lounges. It was all fitted by J.L. Hudson of Detroit. This was our representative for a ship on the Great Lakes. And there was immense pride for the people who sailed on it too. If you got on the Fitzgerald, that was a big deal.
You'd think they were going on a European cruise or the Mediterranean or something with all the stuff they brought with them. But they were usually executives of companies that Ogilvy Norton did business with, Bethlehem Steel, Armco Steel, that kind of thing. And they were executives and their families. And they didn't pay a dime for the privilege of riding on the Fitzgerald. But it was great PR for the company. The towel is embroidered with the name STR, Streamer Edmund Fitzgerald. And these were the linens that were in the guest staterooms. And then after their 5-day trip, when they were loading up to leave, somehow these often found their way into their luggage as a souvenir.
The galley was better than those found in hotels. All stainless steel, which back then was a big deal. Gigantic freezers, refrigerators, slicers, you name it, they had it all. So they would pull chefs from fancy hotels to work on this ship. This is what you go home to your country club and brag about, and the Fitz knew that. They had Polaroid cameras waiting for you in the VIP quarters, in the recreation lounge, the viewing lounge and so on, for you to take Polaroid photos, to take them home and show off at your country club back home.
She was a tourist attraction, and her reputation preceded her. I remember going out on deck if I was off duty, if I was on afternoon break and we were going through the Sioux, just to see the crowd on the shore and wave at them, and they're taking pictures of everything that moves or doesn't move.
The Fitz was the celebrity. There's no question about it. The guys who served on the Fitz, whom I've talked to, said, I've been on other ships. On this ship, you are a rock star. Get your hair right because they're taking photos of you through Sault Ste. Marie, through Port Huron, through Detroit, and Toledo. And no other ship had that same cachet. One reason was Captain Pulser, the captain before McSorley. He was a bit of a ham. He loved getting on the bullhorn and saying, "Rise and shine, campers," going past a campground. He'd come out dressed as Santa Claus in July and throw candy at the kids at the Sioux Locks. He would deliver the Tiger scores through the bullhorns as they went through back when people didn't get the Tiger scores on their phones. A bit of a ham, but that was part of the whole glamour, if you will, of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
My one regret, being the son of a Laker, is that my mother assumed the burden of raising 4 children, 4 boys, virtually by herself.
Why do we not know the sailors? The answer is they're not home. They're on a boat. 9 months out of the year, they're sailing the Great Lakes. So even if they lived next to you, you wouldn't see them. They're not running your PTO, your Rotary Club, or your Little League baseball team. They're on the lakes.
Your mom, that must have been a lot.
Yes, and Mom did not drive, and she was raising 7 kids. So yeah, kids at school didn't understand, why my dad wasn't around. And I said, well, he's got a job, just like everybody, most dad, you know, he just happened to work on a ship and not on the farm or in factory or like that was just his job.
When my dad was home for the short time in the winter that the lakes were frozen, he was lost. He didn't take a part-time job or anything. He just sat around the house. He couldn't wait to get back out on the water. So consequently, the four of us never got to know him as closely as we would have liked. He took care of us. He made sure we were well cared for and well provided for, sent me to college, all that stuff. So, but I would have liked more of his time just to be with him.
Pay was very good back then because the unions did a good job keeping the pay up. A lot of these guys could get overtime. A deckhand at age 22 could make 3 or 4 times what a teacher made in their hometown. So it was a good deal. And these guys did well. They could afford a cabin on Lake Huron. They could afford to put their kids through the state school system here in Michigan with 15 state universities. The American dream was embodied in these people, and it really worked.
As it turned out, someone had left the ship who worked in the galley, and they needed a porter, essentially, to take care of our passengers. I was in class at Bowling Green and was called out of the class, took the call, and they said, if you can be in Toledo by 5 o'clock at the docks, the job is yours. I was in such a hurry to get to the ship. So the only photo I have of me on board the Fitzgerald is the one that shows me standing at the rail in my Cook whites and my black dress shoes. I felt like I was really doing something important. Again, I was working hard to make my father proud of me, but I was making pretty good money while doing it by 1960s standards. For a kid 19 years old doing fulfilling work like that and meeting these remarkable crewmates, each of whom had a story to tell, a fascinating life. In the pecking order, deckhands and porters, we were about the same level, not very high. And my first day on the Fitzgerald, the cook told me I had to peel an entire bag of onions for dinner. I did what I was told, and because I emerged from the pantry where the onions were with red eyes and tears on my face, and that's how I served my first meal. And I knew that this was part of a hazing ritual they do, and I figured my dad might have even have put them up to it. He was on another ship elsewhere in the fleet, but they talk. Along about halfway through my season on the Fitz, Dad was transferred over to the Fitz to become chief engineer. In other words, the second best job in the company. The day my dad was transferred over and came aboard, he came on board looking for me, knowing I was working in the galley. And he had just come aboard from shore where all this iron ore dust collects. So he had it all over his shoes. And I'm mopping in the galley. And he walks in looking for his son. And I see red boot prints every couple feet as he approaches. And I yelled at my own dad. I said, "Get out of my galley." And he kind of smiled and he backed off a little bit. And I always joke that it was the only time in Great Lakes maritime history that a lowly porter told off the chief engineer and lived to work another day. But he got a big kick out of that. So that was the most fun I think I ever had, was telling my dad, "Get out." These men were among the hardest working, most dedicated people I've ever been around. Speaking specifically of my crew in 1963, but that was unchanged in 1975. My dad knew all of them over the years, and they were a special bunch.
I talked to guys who were on that crew, and they said it was by far the best crew on the Great Lakes. Man, work together. You got to work together to make this thing work. And are you different? Of course you're different. You're 29 guys. But we're on this ship for 9 months. How do you want it to go? Blaine Wilhelm, handsome guy, oiler, was scared of the engineering test, was about to take it again in the next off-season. He is the father of Heidi Braben.
I guess they played poker on the ship, I don't know, but he had this thing where he would never spend his change. And he'd have a coffee can and he'd just throw all his change in there the whole time he was on the ship. But when he'd get home, he'd split it up and give it to the kid to his children, just for, you know, so we could go buy candy or whatever. You know, I was only 12 when he died. I don't have a huge amount of memories of him, but I know he liked to read. He liked to read. He read a lot. One of our favorite pictures we have, the mom and dad are sitting in the backyard, just sitting in the grass with their backs to the camera, just sharing the newspaper. You know, he liked to read, because when he was at home, he was home. He was very much there. There's a lake near where we grew up that I found out years later, him and his siblings and cousins and used to go to a lot of times. So in the summertime when he was home on vacation, he would take us out there a lot. But first we had to go pick blueberries so he could have blueberry pie when he got home. I didn't really know a whole lot. All I know is he worked in the engine room, how they just kept the engine running and making sure they were greased.
In the engine room, the oilers and the wipers had very tough jobs. And down in the engine room, if it's 90 degrees outside, it's 120. You don't put your hands on metal without gloves, or else you leave your skin there. These are guys who were not supposed to get along. The engine crew usually does not get along with the pilot house on most ships. You got 3/4 are World War II vets, and 1/4 are guys who don't want to go to Vietnam. With the long hair and the lamb chops and all that, they don't usually get along in 75. These guys got along famously. Captain Ernest McSorley was considered simply the best captain on the Great Lakes. And you think I'm making all this stuff up. I talked to his rivals. I talked to people on other ships, and they said everyone knew he was the best in the Great Lakes. There wasn't much question about that. He was considered the best in rough weather. That matters, obviously. He delivered more and faster than anyone else. He was very aggressive in the wheelhouse. He never once backed off and laid anchor during a storm. He was known to go, go, go. And he was considered a great guy on top of all that. His crew would follow him from ship to ship to ship, including his last assignment on the Edmund Fitzgerald. And the young guys and the old guys all loved that man, truly. McSorley gets a bonus once he's passed his quota, and he's passed it. And his wife Nellie was in a healthcare facility, I think for cancer. It's all secondhand at that point. So he was trying to get enough money to pay for her healthcare after he retired. That was going to be his last trip. It would be 5 of his colleagues' last trip. This is their retirement run. I'm not making that up, it's crazy. So one more trip, not to be greedy, to pay for his wife's health care going forward. So this is a tack-on trip. I learned a lot by researching this book. One shocking fact is that I talked to experienced Great Lakes sailors who've done both the Atlantic Ocean and the Great Lakes. John Hayes, 12 years in the Atlantic Ocean, 23 years in the Great Lakes. He said the Great Lakes are far more dangerous than the Atlantic Ocean, and it's not even close. And anybody who's done both will tell you that.
This area has come to be known as the shipwreck coast. In the area of Whitefish Point, there's roughly 200 shipwrecks just in this area alone. So it can be dangerous any time of year.
The weather can change in an instant, and everything on the Great Lakes is wind driven.
Oh, it's horrible. We've been out where we're searching for shipwrecks, and it was fog and not a ripple on the water. And by the time we were coming back, we were going through 10-foot waves that one guy put a life jacket on, and we were almost hitting the ceiling.
Lows in the mid-50s. Northwest winds up to 5 miles per hour.
These are the old-fashioned radars. That's all they had back then.
Flood watch in effect until 8 p.m. this evening.
And you relied on these. These are the two things that the Edmund Fitzgerald lacked that night. Both the long and the short radars were knocked out.
It wouldn't be necessarily graphics or things like that. It would just be a text forecast, and then they would be on their way. And then as conditions changed during the voyage, either they would be radioed information or they wouldn't know.
The storms can really kick up very, very quickly here. It's not like saltwater in the sense that I think it maybe takes a little bit longer for those waves to get big and dramatic on the Atlantic or the Pacific.
And so you have these storms now with this Arctic air feeding in, but you have the relatively warm waters below. That air is warmer. That creates a more unstable environment, and it causes these storms to explode. And it's a very common phenomenon here in the fall, and the peak period is those first 2 weeks of November.
On Sunday, November 9th, when the Fitzgerald leaves, it is 70 degrees in Duluth. It's never 70 degrees in Duluth on November 9th. And they're in t-shirts. Guys are playing golf on land. You can see those guys play golf. a great day. That's bad news.
So here we are, 7 a.m., Monday, November 10th, 1975. This is the day that the Edmund Fitzgerald sank. Notice that that low has moved from Kansas all the way to the Great Lakes in just 24 hours. And notice these lines here. These are isobars, lines of constant pressure. All of these extra lines, that shows the explosive development of this low as it came into the Great Lakes. Again, that classic time of year where these storms just blossom over the Great Lakes because of the warmth of those waters. The storm continued north through the day. The wind shifted to the north and then the northwest, and the strongest wind was on the backside of this low. This is the moment, and this is the storm that sank the Edmund Fitzgerald.
So both ships, the Anderson and the Fitzgerald, start head of the lakes. They sail together the northern route. Instead of straight over Keweenaw, Whitefish Bay, they're going north for the protection of the shore and the winds. Here's where they turn down south. The red line is the Fitzgerald. They went around Michipicoten Island. Now the question is, they sailed too close to Caribou and the 6 Fathom Shoal. If they did, they might have bottomed out there, damaged the hull, taken on water, and that's where the list might have started. One more thing about the northern route. By taking 14 more hours to go that direction instead of the straight shot across, you've given the storm a 14-hour head start. And McSorley did not know this, we know that these two storms collide right in front of Whitefish Point at exactly the wrong place, at exactly the wrong time, and it was the only ship in that area at that hour. If he went straight shot, he probably would have made it 14 hours earlier.
It was a bad call in a storm that went way faster than they thought. So the wind direction flipped on them as they got way up by Michipicoten. They were in the eye of the storm, and when it flipped on them, now it was building from Fort William or Thunder Bay, Ontario, the full length of Lake Superior. So now you have 30-foot waves that are meeting them before they can get to Whitefish, and they thought they could get there faster, and they didn't.
The waves are coming west-east, and you're going south, all right, down the eastern shore of Lake Superior. So the waves are coming like this, and you're going like this, all right? 729 feet by 75 feet, that is not where you want to be. So these guys are very aggressive. They're very unaccustomed to sharing anything on the radio, and yet McSorley does. He said, I've got a starboard list. This is now serious. And he's confessing to him that I'm in trouble, basically, and lets on more than he normally would. And the Anderson picks up on it and knows they have to help. Once he knew he had a list, which means you're tilting to the right side, the starboard side. You're probably taking on water, the load might have shifted. That's a bad place to be on a ship. He decides to wait for an hour, basically, for the Anderson to catch up. This is a rational decision because he's lost his long radar, his short radar, the lighthouse at Whitefish Point. The light is out at Whitefish Point. That's the one lighthouse every sailor wants to see. And even the radio beacon that signals you where you are from the lighthouse, that is also out. So he has no radar, no lighthouse, no beacon. He's blind, truly. He might even have the wrong map at that point. So he wisely waits, in some ways, for the Anderson to catch up to guide him in. But while that's happening, his ship is filling with water. And all he needed was one more hour, that hour, to get to Whitefish Bay. He's talking to the Anderson, and the Anderson says, how are you making out with those problems of yours? And Captain McSorley says, and I quote, we are holding our own. A classic stoic captain, not going to complain, not going to panic. We're going to be okay, that's what he thinks.
One vessel was in radio contact. Have they been able to give you any information?
No, in fact, the commanding officer of the vessel was more surprised than we were, I believe. He was in radio communications with the vessel just before it went down, and they didn't report any immediate difficulty.
He comes up on deck, he looks for the Fitzgerald, and Cooper cannot find him through binoculars or the radar. They don't know where it went. So they start to search. They look, they can't find anything. They finally get to safety, and that's when they call the Coast Guard and said, we need help looking for this ship. We don't know where it's at.
What time was the last time that you had any cars or that you noticed you had the Fitzgerald in front of you, over? 1900. 1900, he was approximately approximately 15 miles from the high hump at Chris Point. That's when I was talking to him. He was 15 miles from the land. I asked him how he was making out with his problem. He said he lost those vents and he had a lift, and he said he was holding his own. The last time I talked with him, he said he was holding his own, and that's the last time I lost contact after that. I estimated the waves for some of the big ones between 20 and 25 feet.
Maybe the Andersons' radars weren't quite working up to snuff after that storm. But in any case, Captain Cooper did keep radioing the Coast Guard. Eventually the Coast Guard did ask the Anderson to turn around and head back out into the lake, which is not something I think that Captain Cooper was very excited about.
Yeah, you think you could come out and go back and take a look in the area, over? I'll go back and take a look, but God, I'm afraid that I'm going to take a hell of a beating out there on it. That would be good if you could turn around and head out that way, and we're going to try to get as many other vessels that can possibly get underway and proceed to that area. Over. Do you realize what the conditions are out there?
Cooper said there's no way he could have stopped the Anderson to pick up, people on a lifeboat. He couldn't have done it, but he went back because that was the spirit of what sailors do.
There was another ship, the William Clay Ford, went out as well.
We're walking into the pilot house of the William Clay Ford. Here it is in all its glory. A very important ship, owned by the Ford Motor Company, of course. So that night, November 10th, 1975, Don Erickson is the captain of the William Clay Ford. They've already anchored in Whitefish Bay. They finished a harrowing trip across Lake Superior. And then the Coast Guard asked him to go back out.
We had about 8 or 10 ships anchored in the bay. We were talking to Anderson, says, well, he might go back out there. And so I'm thinking, well, if my son was on that ship, which I knew a lot of people on that ship, if my son was on that ship, I sure want some of my friends to come out and look for my son. So I asked the rest of the guys, say, you want to go out there? You think we should go out there? And every one of them says, well, whatever I wanted to do, they would do. So I says, well, get her underway. We'll get the engine ready, and we'll go out and we'll take a look.
Now you're going to go pull up anchor and go back out in 30-foot waves, try to find a ship you know is already gone. And that is the sailor's code right there.
There was definitely a big search going on, but the conditions were just so bad that night. It was really hard, even for the Coast Guard. You had the wood rush coming from the other end of the lake, but some of the Coast Guard vessels that were here, based out of Sault Ste. Marie, one of them was not even rated to be out in conditions like that, so they didn't leave the bay. They were having mechanical issues with another one, so it was a tough night for sure.
Very upsetting to see this. Can you give us a progress report as of this hour, Lieutenant?
Well, we're continuing the search. We've got 2 vessels presently out there searching the area. We have 2 helicopters, and we haven't found any additional debris from last night.
Smaller vessels got into the act the next morning. There was a Canadian fish tug that ended up, a commercial fishing vessel that ended up going out and searching as well. They found a number of the life jackets, life rafts. Eventually were able to see where the lifeboats were floating about, which were recovered by other ships.
Well, we actually heard on the nightly news.
A freighter carrying a crew of 29 disappeared on Lake Superior during a severe storm last night, and so far no survivors have been found. The freighter, the Edmund Fitzgerald, was transporting iron ore when it ran into high winds and 25-foot waves.
I just remember hearing it on the news, and then my mother, she sent us to bed, and I was upstairs and I couldn't sleep, so I came back downstairs. And I remember her being on the phone, trying to get anybody to tell her anything, and she couldn't get through to anybody. She even had the operator break into somebody's phone conversation. And I just remember curled up in a chair saying, Mom, I'm scared. The next time period is kind of a blur.
I was getting ready for bed about 11 o'clock Pacific time, and I kind of was half listening to Harry Reasoner on the news, and he's saying a Great Lakes vessel has been lost and is feared gone on Lake Superior.
An air and sea search is continuing for possible survivors of the Edmund Fitzgerald, a 729-foot ore carrier, which apparently broke apart and sunk last night on Lake Superior.
And so I went out, paid a little more closer attention to the television, and he said Edmund Fitzgerald. And I remember what a crude graphic they had. They didn't have the sophisticated TV graphics that we take for granted today. And it was just almost like a kid's cartoon drawing of a ship tilted and sinking. And my heart sank along with it. I realized that if that ship is gone and nobody got off, then my uncle's gone. And hard as it was to believe that it could be the Fitzgerald, I sort of figured it might be, because in mid-November, not a lot of ships were still out. Many had already gone to winter dock. And but the Fitz was always out there because it was another load to carry, another tonnage record to set. And so I fully expected the Fitzgerald to be out there. Now, I knew my dad wasn't on the Fitz at that time, but I knew my uncle was. Everybody was checking, have you heard anything? Have you know anything? And of course, you're still clinging to that slim chance that, as violent as that storm was, that they somehow got into a boat, one of the boats got free and they got off it. But by the end of the 11th, that hope was gone.
Even though the Coast Guard now considers the Fitzgerald lost, officers continue to plot the area where debris was sighted in a search for possible survivors. Officials, however, say it would be impossible to live more than 4 hours in the 49-degree waters of Lake Superior.
Ralph G. Walton, oiler.
If you look at the ship's bell that is on display at Whitefish Point Museum, it says Ralph G. Walton. And until he died, I did not know his first name was Ralph, because growing up, he was always Uncle Grant. He only wanted to be known by his middle name. And it was only when he died that I realized his name was Ralph. Uncle Grant was what unified us all. He was our reason to get together. He was the guy whose personality drove it all. He was one of the happiest people I've ever met. I mean, laughing all the time, always had a joke. My father was much more serious about his vocation. I don't want to suggest my Uncle Grant was not, but he was not a lifer like my dad. So he enjoyed his time on the lakes. He enjoyed the camaraderie of his shipmates. My dad was 55 at the time of the accident. He had lost his brother, and he had lost his love for what he was doing, and he retired. He left the lakes. I couldn't believe it. In hindsight, of course, I realize now how much it aided him that his brother, no doubt, who might have gotten his job with Dad's help and recommendation, that felt some responsibility for my uncle's demise. And of course, we all tried to tell him no, could not have possibly known. But he just didn't have the heart for it anymore. From a man who could not wait during the off-season to get back to the ship and fit out for a new season, to a guy who wanted nothing to do with it.
Blaine H. Wilhelm, oiler.
When my older sisters was due to give birth any day, she did not know about Dad until after my niece was born on the 14th, because the doctors were afraid, that it would shoot her blood pressure up and cause problems. So she was stationed in Dover, Delaware at the time, and she never, like I said, she called us to tell us a baby was born, and we're like, oh, that's great, kind of going, really awkward because nobody told her yet.
Bruce L. Hudson, maintenance.
Bruce Hudson had gone to Worcester College in Ohio and then Ohio State University in forestry, but took a couple years off to be a deckhand, making very good money, loved it, saved his money. Met a girl, Cindy, in Toledo, a waitress. He found out 2 months before the ship went down that she was pregnant. And he said, don't worry, we're gonna move in together, we'll raise our child together, but can I still go on my cross-country trip in my muscle car, the Dodge Challenger, with Mark Thomas? And she said, sure, baby's not due until June. Ruth Hudson loses her only child and thinks that is the end of her family, and then discovers 6 months later that she's about to be a grandmother. Mark Thomas, the deckhand, was going to get in Bruce Hudson's Dodge Challenger and go on a cross-country trip as soon as they landed in Toledo 2 days later. Thomas Benson. As John Hayes told me, some sailors are trying to be like their dads and some sailors are trying to run away from their dads. He was in the second category. His parents had a bad divorce. He took his mom's side, but his dad was trying to reconcile with him. He was going to be the best man in John Hayes' wedding the following summer. Oliver Champeau, better known as Buck Champeau, had one daughter, Debbie, and he spoiled her rotten. Got her a used Rambler for her high school years and a fancy dress and shoes and a hairstyle for her junior prom. Handsome Ransom Cundy, been a copper miner in the Keweenaw Peninsula and wanted out, and he got out on a ship. Happy-go-lucky guy, a lot of fun, people loved him. Did not know how to swim, told his daughter it only prolongs agony. Paul Ripa, deckhand, played football back in suburban Cleveland. He was a very good friend of Patrick Devine's, who gave him a Moody Blues tape to keep after Patrick Devine was bumped off the ship. By all accounts, a very good guy. Nolan Church worked in the taconite factory for decades, raising 5 kids in Silver Bay, Minnesota. In his 50s, he decided to leave shore, become a porter, and soon got to the Edmund Fitzgerald, and he loved it. He said to his kids, don't worry, there's not a hole big enough in Lake Superior to fit this gigantic ship. First mate, Eddie Binden, bought his wife a 25th anniversary diamond ring that weekend in Duluth and gave it to a friend of his to give to her instead of just getting on the ship and giving it to her in Toledo. So when the ship went down, she received 3 or 4 days later a 25th anniversary ring in the mail. She wore it the rest of her life. And that was Eddie Binden. David E. Weiss, also known as Cowboy Weiss from California, a Jewish guy from LA who found his home in Traverse City and finally felt at home. He had asked to get off the ship a month earlier, 2 months earlier. And his supervisor, John Tanner, at the Great Lakes Maritime Academy, refused, saying, you shot your mouth off, you gotta make it right, get back on the ship, you'll be okay. And that's why he stayed on the ship. Captain Ernest M. McSorley speaks for itself. By all accounts, the best captain on the Great Lakes. The best in rough weather, the best pilot, and also the best recruiter and retainer of crew talent. They were elite. John D. Simmons, that was McSorley's best friend. He was going to retire also. Bob Rafferty, a legend also, 62 years old, comes out of retirement to fill in as a favor to Captain McSorley. They knew how good he was as the chief steward, so he comes back on, and he sends a postcard back home. I should be home by November 8th or 9th, but you know, things can always change. And that's his last postcard.
And I think we all have to acknowledge, rightfully so, that if it wasn't for Gordon Lightfoot and his song, his excellent song, there really would not be the awareness of the Edmund Fitzgerald that we have today.
The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down at the big lake they call Gitchagumi.
You go through the guitar solo, it comes back in, he goes, does anyone know where the love of God goes when the wave turned the minute to the hours? And the hair on my arm goes, boom, like every time.
Does anyone know where the love of God goes? Yeah.
Does anyone know where the love of God goes when the waves turn the minutes to hours? That's reality. That tells you maybe a snippet of what those men felt that night.
The one that gets me the most is, does anyone know where the love of God goes when the waves turn the minutes to hours? When I was writing that portion of the book, I played that song a lot. And I'd often get choked up because they had to feel that. They had to feel that.
What about up here? What about up north? Gordon Lightfoot's music speaks to the North Country. It's about the water, the woods, lost loves, broken hearts. I thought this is something I could maybe put together. So I got the best musicians I could find, and we did a show. And then we did another show. We sold both of them out. The guys that's in the band said, we should do this. We should go play. So we have been. I've been performing as Gordon Lightfoot live in concert for 17 years. We had the look, we had the clothing, we had the backstage set behind us. Showed Gord a picture once of that, and he said, you know, this could be us. I mean, you've got everything down. This could be our show. I said, Gord, all we need now is the talent.
Gordon Lightfoot, being someone who grew up in the Great Lakes, he knew about shipping to a certain degree. He knew it wasn't an easy life. And I think he also felt that story probably got a bit of a short shrift, so to speak.
The way the song came about is very unlikely. He was working on an Irish sea shanty the night the ship went down. He was in his attic at Toronto. He was a great sailor himself. He had competed in the Port Huron to Mackinac race and done very well. That night, when it's howling in Toronto, he thought, man, it must be hell on Superior tonight.
He told me that he went downstairs to get a cup of coffee, and the news was coming on. And it talked about this ship that had gone down in Lake Superior. But about a week later, he saw an article in Newsweek magazine, and that told some things about the ship. And it wasn't a cover story or a feature, it was just a blurb in a news index. But it started out by talking about the legend of the Chippewa tribe that said that the lake never gave up its dead. Gord took the words right from that article and wrote that song.
The lake, it is said, never gives up her dead when the skies of November turn gloomy.
But as he did this in the fall of 1975, they were preparing to do an album called Summertime Dream. And that was to be the follow-up for Gord's Gold. Gord's Gold had all those big hits. The record company said, you know, people are listening to you, you got to come out strong. You got to come up with another big hit album here. He had 22 songs selected for Summertime Dream, and the record company was going to take 10. In between takes of Spanish Moss or Summertime Dream or Never Too Close, some of these great songs that appeared on that, he's still playing around with those chords. And the guys in the band start saying, you know, what is that? So, well, it's a shipwreck song. What shipwreck? Well, the ship that went down in Lake Superior.
And he's not even rehearsed it yet. And they finished the album in 3.5 days, but they're paying for 5 days for the studio. And the producer says, why don't you try that song you've been screwing around with? He goes, no, it's not ready. He's very self-conscious about this. He wants to honor the sailors, does not want to seem cheap. The guy says, look, man, I'm charging you for this 1.5 days, whether you like it or not. So the band is here, the producers are here. You might as well give it a shot. You've got nothing to lose.
And Rick Haynes, the bass player, said, you know, I could come up with a bass riff like a thunder. Pee Wee Charles, pedal steel. So you want something that sounds like wind a little bit? I could make a kind of an eerie wind. Yeah, that could work. And Terry Clements, the late Terry Clements, told me, lead guitar player. He asked Gord, you know, how are you going to start this? And Gord said, I don't know. Come up with something. Well, he would do that a lot. Barry Keane, the drummer, said, Gord, you want drums in this? And Gord said, yeah, I'll nod to you when to come in. So in the second verse, Gordon nodded. Barry came in with the drums, and they played through, and they finished the song. And Terry told me that I said, jeez, that thing gave me the shivers down my spine. And Rick said, I think you've got a hit here, Gord. You know, the record company ought to hear this. Record company heard it and said, it's okay. We'll think about it, work on it, and get it ready to put on the album.
So they tried again, not as good. They tried again, not as good. They tried it the next day, not as good, not as good, not as good. They tried it a month later, not as good. The song you hear on the radio is the first time any group ever played it. Not a first take, first time ever.
The guys in the band had never played it before, and they'd never heard the words. And of course became the #1 song in 1976 in Canada. It hit the charts at #1. #2 in our country, by the way. You remember 1976? #1 song was not the record of Edmund Fitzgerald, it was #2. #1, Barry Manilow, I Write the Songs. Sometimes it works out that way.
In a musty old hall in Detroit, they prayed in the Maritime Sailors Cathedral.
He talks about the musty old hall in Detroit. That's Mariners Church, of course. When he meets Reverend Ingalls not too long after, Reverend Ingalls is very respectful about this. But he said, look around, look at this place. It's not a musty old hall, is it? He goes, you're right. And all concerts after that, he said a rustic old hall.
Bruce Hudson's mother, who said that she had a bone to pick with Gordon. And it was about the fact that her son Bruce was in charge of the hatch covers. And there was that line in the song that said, you know, at 7 p.m. a main hatchway caved in. He said, fellas, it's been good to know you. It made it sound like her son Bruce was the cause of the sinking of the ship. Gordon felt terrible. I mean, he didn't write this lyric to point the finger at somebody. And so he did change the line, you know, and live in concert. Can't change the record. At 7 p.m., it grew dark. It was then. He said, fellas, it's been good to know you. And that's the way the family enjoys hearing that today.
At Whitefish Point, when the families were up there for the memorial, he'd come up the day before purposely to meet with the families and talk to them, and then he'd leave as to not distract from the memorial.
Everybody who lost a loved one that night loved Gordon Lightfoot from that point forward. I mean, he reached out to all of us.
The last time I saw him, he was leaving and headed down a ramp at a theater backstage, and I was saying goodbye, and I said to him, I said, you know, Gordon, you've really taken care of a lot of good things. And I thanked him for what he had done for me and everything, and I just said, you're really doing well. And he said, Michael, I just want to leave a clean campsite. I thought that was really a neat way to put it. Isn't that what we all want, is to leave a clean campsite in life? And I think Gordon did do that.
Does anyone know where the love of God goes when the waves turn the minutes to hours?
The most controversial dive was Fred Shannon's in the mid-90s.
He called himself a documentary producer, but he had a VHS camera. You know, he fancied himself to do that, but he knew he couldn't write it. He also knew he couldn't do it all, so he got a 2-person camera crew, myself and Tom, to film everything. He took all the money that was supposed to build his wife's dream home, $70,000, and rented one of the most famous little submarines on, really in the ocean, the Delta. Bob Ballard had just taken it to Lusitania. He shipped it all the way up to the Sioux, and we took the yellow submarine down to see the Edmund Fitzgerald. It was minutes to get down, and then an hour and 45 minutes of not only exploring, but a lot of lost time, going in circles, trying to figure out where we were, until we finally realized that we made it to the stern section. Then all of a sudden the name Edmund Fitzgerald came across our starboard windows, and it was bigger than the windows. So it was huge, it was cracked, it looked like it had been destroyed, and it was unbelievable. So I went from nervous to extremely excited that I was on the most famous shipwreck on the Great Lakes. And then we came up around the bow, and all of the canvas that they used to keep the water off the deck was hanging like blankets out the window. And I was like, oh my God, this is a grave site. So it was a roller coaster, really excited, then just tragically sad that 29 guys had died. There were 2 family members who were very outspoken about, you know, I think the only reason we got to dive is because we had a restriction, no putting cameras into the portholes, no going into the broken windows, no putting lighting inside the shipwreck. They wanted us to avoid seeing anything that they felt was inside, and that was the crew. What they didn't know was one of the crew members were outside. And we found a body. What were we supposed to do with it? If we didn't film it, they'd say you never found anything. We were in a catch-22, and as a journalist, I don't hide stuff. I put it out there and I say, this is what we think, and there's people who think it's not even someone from the Fitzgerald. Not one close-up of that ever turned up anywhere. The National Enquirer wanted to buy that footage from Shannon. He could have bought his wife's dream home that she never got, but to his defense, never sold that footage of close-ups where you could see the guy's face, and we never tried to identify that person out of respect for the family.
It's the Fred Shannon dive that motivated the families to take action, to have it declared a grave site, and no more dives can be made.
The last display that's here confirms that the Edmund Fitzgerald is in Canadian water. The legislation then would stipulate that the area, which is 500 meters around the Edmund Fitzgerald, or 1,640 feet, shall not be approached. It is a maritime archaeological site. If one does so, then it's $1 million fine. To its credit, the Canadian government declared it all a gravesite, and that's not allowed to go down, and that's as it should be. Let the men rest in peace.
Do I want to go back? Absolutely, but there's other things that are in play now that I'm a board member at the museum, that I've met more of the family members, but they also have to know too that they're going to get pushback from me as a documentary producer, as a historian, one of the most recognized on the Great Lakes. I think we deserve to know the truth on that, and we can't have one person say it'll hurt my feelings, we shouldn't go.
At this point, you're not going to learn anything. It doesn't matter. I know numerous family members, and we all pretty much have the same consensus at this point. Leave them be. It's a graveyard. Don't touch it.
I could never, in my mind, fathom losing a loved one and not being able to recover them. My grandfather was sheriff of Muskegon, was killed in a car crash, but we got to bury him. So I understood the public loss very well, but I can't understand the depth of my loved one is still down there and now cameras can go see them. That's very ethically challenging for me, but as a journalist as well, it's part of the story. So that's been my eternal struggle.
Are there any theories as of this time as to what really happened to the Fitzgerald out there?
Well, there are any number of theories.
Well, it's purely speculation, but with a following sea like that, you would consider the possibility of the ship broaching to and possibly capsizing, or else just breaking in half and splitting apart.
The only theory I'm willing to virtually dismiss out of hand is the idea that the deckhands had failed their jobs of latching 1,400 C-clamps basically on these 21 cargo hatches. It's a hell of a job. It takes about an hour with 3 guys working full blast, and it's rigorous. But I talked to 2 guys who served in the ship that year, all right, as deckhands with the guys who were left on the ship. They said there's no way in November McSorley or McCarthy, the first mate, would ever let them leave port without all 1,400 dogged or latched before they left. So I don't buy it. The ones we've seen on the floor, most of them have been latched also. And you wouldn't latch a third or half. You latch all of them or only do the corners. All right, the corners are a small percentage of the total. That's a nice July day, you do that. All right, so if you latched the ones we've seen, they're all latched. I don't buy that one at all. Ogilvy Norton was the company out of Cleveland that leased the ship. It's now bankrupt and bought by somebody else. They're not heroes in the story, I'm sorry. And in no class settlement with the whole 29 crew, whoever got a good lawyer and called them up and got the best deals one by one by one. They only paid out exactly what they had to. So they have every incentive to say that the deckhand screwed up. It's not us. It's your family members, not us. And therefore we're not paying out very much.
The Fitz crew was the very best of the best. I don't believe that notion for a second that they forgot to tighten the hatches. In November, of course they would. That was just, it goes with the job.
And Anderson is convinced that the Fitzgerald in front of them went directly over 6 Fathom Shoal. If it did, it almost certainly bottomed out and did damage to the hull of the ship, and that's how you start taking on water the rest of your trip.
Every architect said it would have sank at Caribou if it hit bottom there. So for people to tell me it ran aground, that was a really convenient excuse for the shipping companies who were getting immense pressure from the Coast Guard to carry less cargo in the winter to allow the weather deck to be higher up off the water. The government was saying, you got to change all this. So the shipping companies all went, oh no, we think McSorley ran it aground and he's dead now. And I think to make him and McCarthy and Simmons scapegoats for this, it's a criminal, quite honestly.
You also get some sense, as deep as 530 feet is, this ship is 729 feet long. So even at a slight angle, about 200 feet would be above water even as the bow hit. So the question is, did it break on the surface? Some say it did. Or did it break after it hit the bow on the floor, which is sandstone? And others say that's more likely. I think it's more likely, but we don't know.
As we approached the upside down stern, I saw 2 hatch covers, and clearly in paint it said 2 and 3. Now those are supposed to be on the bow. They're 150 feet away from the bow. That again proves to me that that ship broke up on the surface. That would never have rained down if she went down nose first. I saw a taconite pile behind the Edmund Fitzgerald. Again, impossible if it took a nosedive and went in. It had to have broken and the stern skipped over a pile of its own inner contents and came to rest upside down on top of it.
This ship flexed more than almost any other ship on the Great Lakes. What role that played, it's hard to say, but it makes it more vulnerable in a rough seas to bending or cracking at clearly the wrong time.
There was a tunnel that ran beneath the deck, the length of the ship, and you could see forever down there. I mean, from one end of the ship to the other. And I would use the tunnel rather than walk out on the deck where if you're pitching and rolling, you don't want to be out there. So I'd use the tunnel and I'd get down there and I'd look forward toward the bow, and every 10 feet or so in that tunnel, there'd be like a miner's lamp hanging on the wall. And in rough weather, the lamps at the far end in the bow would disappear from view and then reappear. That was frightening to me as a 19-year-old kid, not sure that my ship was sound. And so I remember asking the first mate about that, and he said, oh, don't worry about it. He said, it's like a skyscraper in high winds. It yields a little bit to the forces of the sea, of the lake. And so I accepted his explanation, but 12 years later when it sank, I wondered if it was supposed to bend quite that much.
And I talked to Dick Orgel, who was the third mate, who he said, hey, that ship really bends a lot in the seas. And McSorley looks at him and he goes, yeah, sometimes that scares me too. Like, what is that? I mean, that's a guy that clearly thought the ship would not break, but was not paying attention to all the details that were being told to him.
It could have been something that happened to the ship before, and he didn't even come close to the shoal. Maybe he had some kind of structural damage in it that they didn't even know anything about.
Captain McSorley was in the Weather Bureau report as the #1 ship going through big storms. And he knew that that ship would get structural problems with the keel. It broke loose and the Coast Guard monitored how they fixed it. He went through 5 more gales in 1975 alone. Engineer came in, told McSorley, there's still damage down there. Cook heard this, and McSorley said, it only has to hold together a couple more months and I'm done. He knew there was issues, and he kept running through every storm. He told the cook, we don't make money at anchor. That means we don't drop the hook, we push on. So it's really hard to pretend that he didn't have a part in that.
Based on the fact that you had 2 halves or 2 pieces of the Fitz in very different locations, I would subscribe to the theory that the bow and stern were up on 2 large waves, it cracked, and the 2 pieces went down, and then obviously drifted down to their eventual locations at the bottom of the lake. So that's the theory that I would subscribe to.
But all of that footage gave me clues as to what happened, and it really points to not a nosedive, but a catastrophic failure on the surface where the stern section inverts and the bow keeps going on course but crashes into the port side and furrows up a big area that flies onto the deck, but hatches 1 and 5 are clearly collapsed in. That's from that giant wave that Cooper reported damaged his lifeboat. That was 30 feet above Lake Superior.
I took one up around the lifeboat, so there was some very heavy seas occasionally.
So we know it was a big wave, and we know that was probably the end of the Fitzgerald.
I tend to go with John Tanner, who said when a big ship like this goes down, it's very rarely one thing. It's a series of dominoes that start falling. It's nature, the storm of the century, as we've talked about. It is the mechanics of the ship itself that had some built-in flaws. It had some mechanical failures that night, the radar, the lighthouse, all that, and some decisions that were well-meaning but backfired badly. So if you combine all that, there you have it.
That's the great mystery, and that's why, unlike the Titanic, we know exactly what sank that great ship. And while this was just 29 lives as opposed to, 1,600, we do not know for sure what sank the Fitzgerald. And we probably will never know. That it's that mystery that keeps us all transfixed.
I just want to say thank you to anybody that's been involved in this in any aspect at all. This means everything to me. Thank you. To the crew.
Here, here.
To the crew.
Together, these 4 swimmers and then 64 other swimmers swam 411 miles from above the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald to Detroit, finishing here at the Detroit Yacht Club, symbolically finishing the Edmund Fitzgerald's tragic journey 50 years ago.
Thank you.
So 50 years later, the Edmund Fitzgerald has arrived with their cargo. Tomorrow at the Mariners Church of Detroit, we're going to have a memorial service, and we're going to present that cargo to the Deputy Mayor of Detroit.
I want to get my children, my daughter, the other kids, to know their grandfather somehow. So this is my way of making sure they know him and remember.
Every November the 10th, we have a memorial service that takes place up here at Whitefish Point. The core of that ceremony is really the ringing of the Fitzgerald bell. That was recovered in 1995, July of 1995, at the request of a number of the Fitzgerald families to have some kind of a memorial that could be brought up from the ship itself. We take it out of its display case. We'll ring it 30 times, 29 times for each sailor on the Fitzgerald, and then a 30th time for all sailors lost on the Great Lakes.
The crew members were very close. Some of their best friends were on that ship. It's an unusually happy ship in that regard. But the families didn't know each other at all. They live in Toledo and Cleveland and Duluth. They're not anywhere near each other. In the process of trying to raise the bell and declare their shipwreck a gravesite, they met at least once a year and often more than that. And now they meet every November 10th in Whitefish Point together. So they become some of their closest friends.
Definitely. There's been some people I've gotten to know over the years, different family members, and a couple of us have been really close. I'm not going to mention names, but we call ourselves sisters.
I think that the toughest place to play it is at the museum. There's a line in the song that says, "And all that remains are the faces and the names of the wives and the sons and the daughters." At Whitefish Point, when we play up there, it's not like it's a theater where you're up on a stage and the audience is a long ways away and the lights are so bright that you can't see the audience, Instead, we're right there. The first row of people are sitting right in front of us, and the first couple rows are the wives and the sons and the daughters. And I can't look at them. I have to look to the back of the room and focus on why I'm there and the fact that I'm doing this for these families and for Gordon. And I can hear them. I can see the tissues come out, but I don't want to fall apart. And it's always a fear that I will. But I just have to look at the back of the room and keep going and remember that, I'm there in Gordon's place to honor these men and play the song. I don't want to become a distraction.
It was the last ship to founder on the Great Lakes. 6,000 went down from 1875 to 1975, and not one since November 10th, 1975.
I think the bravado of the captains has diminished a lot, but there were a lot of big technological pushes too. At that time, we had one satellite for doing weather, and the picture was horrible. Now we have GOES satellites in stationary orbit that are feeding real time to these captains. We have lifeboats you can jump in and seal the door with radio transmitters that tell the Coast Guard exactly where you're at. Gumby suits you can zip up, jump in the water, and at least get 3 hours of time in Lake Superior before it kills you. So many of those changes. The buoy system that Senator Rupi asked for took 10 years to get it, but it saved many lives with real-time weather reports of what the waves were doing so that skippers could make a more informed decision.
The Fitzgerald really has come to represent shipwrecks on the Great Lakes. Each one of those 6,000 or 10,000 shipwrecks, particularly those that had a dramatic loss of life, all those crew members on those ships had families at home, they had loved ones at home, they left a gaping hole when that ship disappeared. And so when we remember the crew of the Edmund Fitzgerald, we need to remember those other sailors as well.
I'd like to think the bell rings for all 25,000 people who died, and not just the 29 guys who are very well remembered.
It's comforting to me that no one else has to endure what the families of Fitzgerald had to endure, or what those poor men had to endure. Maybe some lessons were learned.
The family members I've talked to, they all said the same thing. We don't know, and frankly, we no longer care how it went down. It's academic to us. We've still lost our father, our cousin, our uncle, my boyfriend, the father of my child, and it doesn't really matter to them at all.
When people ask me, do you want to know what happened? Nobody's going to know. There's no way that they can get a definitive answer on what happened. And at this point, it doesn't matter. Nothing would change.
As somebody who sailed on it, as a crew member, I want to know. But if I never find out, and I suspect I never will, I'm okay with that too. Let the men rest in peace.
The captains I've been with on Lake Superior, they know exactly where that ship is, and they make it a point not to sail over that point out of respect.
We're at 50 years now, and one could reasonably expect that over time that fascination with it will fade. I'm not sure that that's the case. I think it's the Fitzgerald and the tragedy and the loss of these men and the mystery will keep this alive. I hope it keeps their memories alive.
These people got very little, if anything, from the company. They had 3, 4, 5 kids. The breadwinner is gone. You have to tough it out and get over this at the same time. They stuck together and they are holding their own.
I mean, it's beautiful in here. And just the history of this place is just, it's amazing. I don't think I've ever seen a church with this much stained glass in it before. And it's
Chandeliers are cool.
Just the whole history of this place, how long it's been here, and
very detailed.
And all that remains is the faces and the names of the wives and the sons and the daughters.
Now you got to show off your tattoo, child. We are holding our own. Those are the last words spoken, the last words anybody heard from the Edmund Fitzgerald. And then they just vanished.
Old Michigan steams like a young man's dreams. The islands and days are for sportsmen. And farther below Lake Ontario takes in what Lake Erie can send her. The iron boats go as the mariners all know, with the gales of November remembered. In a musty old hull in Detroit they prayed in the Maritime Sailors Cathedral. The church bell chimed till it rang 29 times for each man on the Edmund Fitzgerald. The legend lives on from the Chippewa down of the big lake they call Gitchagumi. Superior, they said, never gives up their dead when the gales of November come early.
It's been half a century now, so I guess the pain has subsided, but the memories will never fade.